Once again, let us welcome back the senior editor at Gun Magazine, Dave Workman, and she is a staff lawyer for the Law Center to Prevent Violence, Allison Anderman. Dave, let me begin with you this time, because as we talk about laws that have been enacted that are not, let's talk about the gun show loophole, which is what many people still focus on, that private sale, and that's the thing that people, and I would imagine the people on Allison's side who are really wanting more gun control think this is something that makes sense. Why does this not make sense, and why does the NRA and so many other people continue to fight against this?
Well, I think that the gun show quote-unquote loophole is kind of a myth. There's been studies done for the Department of Justice over the years that show that less than 1% of convicted felons who used firearms in the course of their crimes got their guns from gun shows. The overwhelming majority of those people got them from illicit sources, street sources. They were stolen guns. They traded for drugs for guns. They got them that way. They got them from members of their families and so-called friends. But very rarely do you find these guns that have come from gun shows.
Okay, well, let me stop there and let me go to Allison on that. Allison, he makes a very good point, and certainly the numbers seem to draw it out, that gun shows are not where a lot of people who commit crimes get their weapons.
That may be true, but we do know that 40% of gun sales occur between private individuals, and as of now, there is no federal law requiring background checks in those private transactions, and that is definitely how a lot of people who use guns to kill their spouses, women are 11 times more likely to be a victim of
but wait a minute,
hang
on a sec here. I get all that, but if there's really not a lot of tremendous evidence that buying the guns here and transferring them privately leads to serious crime, that most of them come from other crimes, does it make sense to be going after that point?
I don't think that information is not, if you're talking about gun shows, that may be true. I don't know that statistic and I can't verify it. But what we do know is that 40% of gun sales occur between private individuals, not necessarily at gun shows, over Craigslist, in various other forums.
Okay, well, there's a good point. I'm going to stop you there and go to Dave. Dave, that's a very good point she makes, because a lot of guns are changing hands and we can't keep track of them if they wind up on Craigslist or any of these various websites.
Well, I think the 40% figure itself is bogus, and even the Washington Post called that a fib. They gave it 3 Pinocchios, which means it's almost a bold-faced lie. That figure's been kicking around for years, and it comes from a study or a survey, a very limited survey that was done prior to the enactment of the Brady Law back in, I believe, 1993. And now, today, I don't think that figure would really pass muster at all.
Okay, so we're going to go back and forth here on figures, and we could do this all day long. But let me do this, about a minute and a half that I have left here. Dave, I'm going to stay with you. What hasn't been done right now that needs to be done 2 years after Sandy Hook that you believe and gun owners believe would make people safer and lead to the cessation of crimes such as these?
Well, I think certainty of punishment is one of these things. We see time and again stories about recidivist criminals being out on the street, people who get involved in these drive-by shootings, who've got 4, 5, 6 felonies against them. You've got to lock these people up and essentially throw the key away on them. We passed 3 strikes you're out in hard time for armed crime in Washington State several years ago, and both of those initiatives, which swept the nation, were started by the so-called gun lobby.
All right, Allison, now I turn to you. The very same question. 2 years after Sandy Hook, what needs to be done in order to make people safer?
Background checks need to be conducted on any transfer of a gun between private individuals. Those laws are the foundational element of protecting our children and our family members from gun violence. They ensure that dangerous people do not have access to guns, and 90% of Americans, over 90% of Americans, support these laws, and they will continue to pass them by voter initiative if our legislatures and our legislators will not act on their behalf.
Dave, I only got about 40 seconds left. I'm going to ask you a question that comes up every time we hear exactly what Allison said. If you've got nothing to hide, why should you fear a background check?
Well, because these background checks, the way that they're designed right now, leads to registration, and we're seeing in places like New York and Connecticut where such laws are being used to actually confiscate firearms from families, bereaved families of people who passed away who were gun owners. And quite frankly, I don't think that a background check, me loaning a firearm to a friend and then having to go through a background check again to get my own firearm back, is going to prevent a crime anywhere.
Allison, I would guess that in the 10 seconds left we have, you disagree with that.
Yes, the NRA has really nothing to say about background checks, so they put out a lot of misinformation. On their website, they say that the Washington law created a waiting period. There's absolutely no waiting period in Washington state. There hasn't been, there isn't one now. And in the absence of a real argument against background checks, they have to make things up.
One of these days, we are going to come out with some real hard stats, and we're going to have to come up with a way to do things here and settle it out. Allison Anderman, Dave Workman, thank you both so much for your time. We are going to do this again. It's a continuing conversation on MidPoint.